Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with this week's episode, did you know that Brilliantly Resilient can come directly to you? That's right, we have keynotes, programs, presentations, workshops, all available to companies, associations, conferences, and organizations, either virtually or live in person. So head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net at the speaking tab to find out more. And while you're there, you can also sign up for our weekly Brilliance Bit, which comes to you once a week directly to your inbox and has a bit of brilliance from this week's show and will keep you living in a brilliantly resilient mindset. Okay, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you going to live there or are you just visiting? Let's check in with Mary Fran and Kristen to learn how to come through not broken, but brilliant.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I am super excited today, if for no reason, actually for many reasons, but for one reason in particular, and that is that my guest's name today is Princess Castleberry. That is the best name, I think, of anyone we've ever interviewed on this show. But this is a lady, despite her wonderfully fairy tale sounding name, has a really important mission. And what I want to do, I'm going to read you a little bit about her bio here. Princess Castleberry is the CEO of Castleberry Global and a professional speaker, wellness and risk management consultant. She delivers solutions from the stage. She speaks about helping organizations to protect people, purpose, and profits. She has been a speaker of TEDx. She's been on Fast Company magazine, Silicon Republic featuring her. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Business from Illinois Wesleyan University, Master of Training and Development from Oakland University, and a certificate of wellness counseling from Cornell University. This is going to be a wonderful interview. Princess, thank you so much today for joining me.
Thank you so much, Mary Fran, for having me.
So, as I said, first of all, your name obviously is fantastic, but you have a really serious mission here, and one that really speaks to me because I think it's something that's been so long neglected, particularly in the corporate world. And again, you talk about you're a management speaker helping organizations protect people, purpose, and profits, but through wellness initiatives. Am I getting
Yes.
that right? Because it's really important.
You are getting that right. I coined myself as the creator of the first risk management centered approach to wellness. And really, I just combined all the things that I loved and invented something. But I really do believe that, the risk management approach to solving problems is so practical, so inclusive. It begs for you to include other people, other perspectives. So it is a catalyst for diversity and inclusion. And so I love risk management and I love the core essence of the process. And so I've been doing it for over 20 years, so I might as
When
well.
you speak about risk management, I think when people think about that in terms of corporations, they immediately go to monetarily, which
Yeah,
there is a part of that in this.
for
But
sure.
I think your emphasis on risk management is more about the people
It
and
is.
how explain that concept of risk management for me.
Yeah, if we just take a step back and look at the term risk, a risk is just the possibility of harm or loss to something of value. And the opposite side of that coin is that risk involves a tremendous amount of opportunity. Now, at the center of those, risks and those possibilities and those opportunities are people. Plain and simple. We are the magic in every company. We are the ones that write and execute the processes. We are the ones that uphold compliance, uphold other people's rights. We are the people that actually have to follow certain processes and procedures that keep ourselves and other people safe. So humans, people are the center of wellness are the center of risk management. And you really can't have one without the other. When you think about this whole concept of a possibility of harm or loss to something of value, and you think about what companies value, they value their people, their purpose, and their profits. They have to, because that's what holds the entire enterprise together.
So, really, at its core, you could make the argument that all risk management should begin with the people, because without
Absolutely.
a healthy organization, things start to fall apart.
Absolutely. And my, one of my number one sayings is every leader is a risk manager. It really is. It's one of my taglines. It's maybe the topic of an upcoming book. Wink, wink.
Yay. Oh, you heard it here first, folks.
And so really that is it. I mean, every single leader is a risk manager, and every person, right? You're the leader of your domain, right? You're the leader of this podcast, you're the leader of your household, in your business, all these things. So everybody has capacity to be a leader, right? But when we move this to the corporate setting, I mean, there is a designated level of professional that are, designated as the leaders in the organizations. And those folks especially have to have risk management skills. And when I say risk management, I just mean the capacity and the tools and resources to identify those possibilities of harm or loss, or to identify opportunity. They have to have the capacity to analyze and assess those risks for their likelihood, for their severity, for how they touch other parts of the organization. And those people have to have the capacity to build solutions and put them into action. That's the risk management process in a nutshell.
Okay. And again, but all of those things can apply, and they do apply in the corporate world to the
Everywhere.
the so-called bottom line part of this. But the thing that really, the reason I really wanted to talk to you about this was
Mhm.
your emphasis on the people. And you talk
Yeah.
about why we have to prioritize well-being to be more effective. So in that grand scheme of things, yes, people are the engines. We're the engines that move everything. But don't you think it's been a rather recent, perhaps since COVID, a kind of a recent concept that corporations have recognized the real need to put wellness initiatives into the corporate structure?
I think what they're realizing is that they've been calling wellness by its other names. I think that, in my opinion, and this is how I've always seen the world, and so I'm happy like everybody else is catching up to this, that, you know, wellness, compliance is wellness, right?
Hmm.
Inclusion is wellness. Respect, communication between leaders and their teams, that is wellness. All of those things is how you achieve wellness and well-being. So they are all one and the same, right? When you think about how a corporation puts certain policies, everything from attendance policies to the policies that uphold labor laws, all of those things are put in place so that humans can be well in their work,
Hmm.
so that they can be treated fairly, so that there's equitable communication, that there are equitable opportunities, so that people are compensated according to, their position and what the law says they should be compensated. And when you think about that wellness wheel, right? Those areas of the wellness wheel: vocational health, financial health, physical health, your environment, right? Your spiritual health, all of those things, right, are things that when you look at it through the lens of an organization, those are all things that are regulated by policy, procedure, and communication. It's all the same thing to me.
So, and I think this is brilliant because you're exactly right. But then that begs the question, have we complicated this over time?
Yeah.
And now we're getting back to, we policy and initiative everything to death.
Yep. We do.
So how can corporations, without feeling like they're having to, again, take on another policy initiative, institute
Yeah.
another thing, how can they begin to simply institute some of these well-being initiatives? Give me like a couple of one, two, three things that they can do to simply start doing this on a more human level as opposed to the corporate structure level.
You know what? I have people always go all the way back to basics, and I ask the leaders that I work with three simple questions. How do you make decisions in this organization? Because how you make decisions, right? How decisions are deliberated, how they're delegated, how certain decisions get eliminated, or who you include in that process has, that's so far reaching. So, how do you make decisions? How do you manage stress in the organization? Every human being comes with their own stress. Every organization has its bottlenecks, has its complications, has its challenges. So, how are we identifying and managing stress in the organization? And the last one for me is how do we resolve and reconcile conflict? And there is a distinction between simply resolving a conflict and coming to terms and reconciling a conflict and restoring the relationships that get marred in conflict. If we can answer those questions around decisions, stress management, and conflict, that is a pretty good indicator for me where an organization is in terms of their wellness, right? There's so many approaches out there, though. You're going to hear a million schools of thought, but that is my unique brand of wellness. I like to focus on those three areas because those are the areas that have the most implications for how people feel, how people are going to be treated, and how they're going to engage in your processes, you know.
Well, I love the idea of recognizing stress as a player in everyday corporate engagement. It's
Yes.
like we're finally saying, okay, this is hard. Like,
This is hard. And I'll tell you this, this has been my number one um, gripe. And my number one gripe in everything post-COVID was that we started to, through media and simply by talking about it too much almost, we started to trivialize burnout and chronic stress. That's where this passion really came from. If you really want like a pin of why I doubled down on this, I started my business initially in late 2019, right? Just ahead of the pandemic. So talk about, I wish I had a crystal
talk
ball.
about being right on the cusp of whoa.
Whoa. But that's my entire career. If I go back through my career and pinpoint, I've always been right ahead of some major ordeal. I don't know how that happens to me, but I got the brilliant idea of leaving my six-figure corporate salary and starting my own business without a lot of startup, without even a really solid plan, if I'm being honest. But I knew it was time for me to exit. And I started this business October 2019 as initially as a fractional risk management and wellness consultancy. And what I mean by that is there's organizations, especially venture funded startups or medium-sized corporations, or even some large corporations that have a temporary need for a risk manager or a temporary need for a people or wellness manager, right? It could be because another executive is on a leave of some sort, medical, maternity, or just taking a sabbatical. It could mean that it's an organization that is just starting up and they are not ready yet to make the capital investment of hiring that role full time, but they need the expertise to start to set some structure and policy. So that's how I thought how I was going to operate in the market. And then COVID hit. And at the time, Mary Fran, my children, my sons were in the first and third grade. So I went from entrepreneur to school home teacher, right? And that was my priority. And I was grateful to be able to pivot very quickly and not only take care of my children, but I worked with several friends of mine. It started off as a joke, but we ended up standing up a 6 hour, it was actually 3 to 6 hour program that we operated in the first 3 weeks of COVID. We ran school almost online for school districts that did not have any programming because the other little secret in my arsenal, I think you mentioned it in my bio, is that I have a master's degree in training and development, instructional design. So I was able to stand up a program with the help of some other teachers um, to help bridge the gap for schools. And so my business started off in this like wavy, wonky way that I didn't intend to work. And then with all the massive disparities that COVID exposed in our healthcare system, in our education system, I was like, okay, my business has to be about something else. And everybody was talking about wellness and these feelings of burnout. But over time, they started to just really trivialize burnout and talk about it like it was, oh, yeah, I got burnout, like it was a common cold or something.
Hmm.
And in my mind, it was as serious as COVID because burnout, if you leave it unmitigated, chronic stress, if you don't do something, if you don't intervene in some way, chronic stress can and will change the size, function, and structure of your brain. That's a fact. And it changes your ability to make sound decisions. It overactivates your stress response, right? And it throws you into conflict. So that's how I started to develop those pillars of my business because I started to see what, unmitigated stress and this trivialization of burnout was doing to people. We started ignoring people. We stopped looking at the systems that perpetuate burnout. We stopped looking at the policies in our society. And I think COVID exposed all of that.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. In that for all of the horrors of COVID, and there were many, at least there became an awareness of the fact
Yeah.
that we cannot operate in a constant state of stress. And more to the point of the leadership that you're addressing, why would you want your people to be operating from a
Yeah,
constant state of stress? It has to stifle creativity. It
it does.
has to stifle even cooperative working, because when you're burned out, I think the tendency is to kind of close in and close
Mhm.
off because you're self-protecting.
Yeah, escapism is one of the first signs. When people are, become very pessimistic about their work in a way that's, just not typical, right?
Right.
People become very pessimistic. They become very cynical about their work. And you hear those types of remarks, and people just want some escape from their present day reality. Those, in addition to some of the, physical things that happen, like not being able to sleep very well, loss of appetite, or sometimes overeating can be a stress response. When you start to see those types of behaviors in people, it's potentially a sign that they're dealing with chronic stress. And what we haven't talked about in society is how these things are tied to rates of alcoholism, drug use, different types of drug experimentation, suicide. Suicide is rampant, in the US, and um, just this inability for people to self-soothe and cope. You know, when you think about some of the core skills that you need just to bring yourself back to center after you get triggered, people don't have that. And we're not talking about that enough in corporate America. And so, through some of the programs, the really unique programs that I offer, I'm able to bring those discussions to the stage and into organizations more intimately to start having these very robust collaborative learning experiences. And because I'm in my mind a part-time comedian as well, I I make it fun. I make it fun and engaging in a surprising way because when people hear that we're having a talk called Burnout Proof Your Team or how to have conflict and still win together, they don't think it's going to be fun. They
Right.
don't think it's going to be full of jokes and laughs and get people up out of their seats. Sometimes there might be dancing in some of my talks. If you know, you know. And yeah, I bring all of that stuff into it because I really truly believe that if you can get people talking laughing together, sharing real stories about what's happening with them, and pair all of that with very practical, actionable solutions that get right to the heart of people's behavior, I think that you can make a difference in an organization. I think you can protect the people, purpose, and profits.
So the thing that strikes me about all of this is again that idea that when you are feeling stressed and burned out, you tend to close off. My son struggled with heroin addiction and alcoholism for many years. And that was my go-to, like underground. This was, don't talk to me about this. I just need to, and it wasn't always the healthiest approach. So this idea of drawing people out and saying, look, we get it. We don't need to know the specifics of everything that you're going through, but we get it. And that idea of sharing and quite honestly, laughter. First of all, when you make people laugh, they remember what you say.
That's right.
And that is
That's
that
right.
is huge. But even those momentary bits of laughter, you were talking about the brain function and all that, that gets those endorphins and the serotonin and all those good things starting to flow. And it just might crack the window enough for people to go, okay, there is some fresh air here. So making a community effort at that in these
Yeah.
organizations sounds like it's really essential. You don't want your team to be isolated and struggling alone. So how do they make this? You just spoke about some practical solutions. What might some of those be when you're dealing with people who there's a lot of angst, personal situations, but what can you do in a general group that kind of leads people out of that?
Well, the first thing really is just recognizing how triggers work, right? So one of the things I teach people in almost every course that I teach is how to understand the basic behavior chain. So it demystifies why people feel triggered and how that trigger turns into a spiral of thoughts, feelings, and the actions that follow. And so when you can just break something down like that in front of a group of 100 people and everybody say, oh, and they relate, all of a sudden you have them communicating like, oh, that happens to you? Well, of course that happens to me. And then they realize that what they thought they were silently suffering through is just the human condition. And now you have 99 comrades to share that experience with. And so just that's a really practical thing that I do is just teaching people that behavior chain and having them take some time to map some of their own behaviors into their behavior chain, right? Another thing, when we talk about on the solution side of it, when I think about this whole concept of decision fatigue, which is another form of stress, right? Decision
I can't
fatigue.
even decide where I want to go to dinner with
Right. Some of us can't. And you know what? I don't make that decision in my household.
please,
I'm like,
somebody just
please,
tell
somebody
me.
decide for me because that's one of those. I can decide policy, strategy, keynotes, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But what meal?
Oh,
Listen, it's a
don't make
problem.
me decide. Very
But
real problem though.
but speaking of that, right? You know, these decisions, and I bring up decision fatigue, especially when I have audiences full of women or where they're majority women, because women make an inordinate amount of decisions because of the roles that we play in our households.
Mhm.
That is just a societal issue. I'm not, I don't ever debate anybody over, somebody says, well, I'm a stay-at-home dad or I do this. Okay, great, sir. But women make an inordinate amount of decisions, and the range is so broad because we are deciding things like household budgets, groceries, meal planning, everything to do with our children, right? If you have children, all of these nuances and all the schedules and everything just related to our children. And that's before we go into the office to try to run a team. That's before we step out into the realm of entrepreneurship to try to run a company and scale a business. So we have a ton of decisions to make. So one of the really practical things, one of the exercises I take people through is categorizing their decisions, right? Because people will try to go at everything full speed, right?
Mm.
And you just can't. The brain doesn't work that way. Your body doesn't like it. And so I teach people to trust their gut And so there's a category of decisions where you just have to learn how to act fast, where the stakes are usually lower. And so you might have an idea, something clicks to you, and you're going to go for it. You're going to try a new podcast format. You didn't vet it out. It's just something about this format or something about that guest made you feel good and you went for it. You know, that could turn out to be a disaster, but it's one of those disasters that are just recoverable. You get up, you dust yourself off, you go back to plan, go back to the old plan, or you reevaluate and you move on. Act fast, go. There's another category of decisions where you have to delegate them. There are many, many things now that my children are 11 and 13 and they're no longer 2 and 4. There's so much that I can delegate to them if I take time to assess their maturity, if I take a little bit of time to do some training with them and holding up the expectation that they can do it. I can delegate a ton. Third category is to deliberate. When I have something very important to do that has higher stakes, that requires diversity of thought, diversity of process, I am going to make some of that decision by committee. I'm going to tap into a personal advisory board. And if we're talking about business, it might be talking to a certain level of executive level peers, going to a board, and so on, right? There's levels to it. And then there's a whole category of decisions that you damn well need to just eliminate out of your life. Anything that is gossipy, trashy, not productive in any sort of way, all of that stuff needs to be eliminated. And I bring up this concept of gossip and trash talk because people have put those things, we've romanticized it and made it fun, and we call it tea and all that. And oh, let's get the tea. I don't want any tea because that T stands for trash. And this is not a high horse moment. This is an opportunity to say that if you accept people dumping trash talk on you, um, you're going to just really complicate your own decision making. When you have, a need to focus, a need to get to a quiet space, everybody's going to still be on your other line calling you because you have said it's okay to dump trash here. So anytime trash comes up in this crazy world, which is often, you're going to be the go-to for the trash talk. And there's plenty of it. People waste more time than anything, just trash talking or listening to garbage. And I just
And
refuse.
and I think to that point, because I was the person when my kids were little and we joined a pool for like 1 or 2 summers, and all the other moms were in this big, huge circle. And I was
Mhm.
under a tree by myself with a book because I was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no,
No
thank you.
thanks.
But to that very point, that kind of energy then takes away everything from all of the important things and
That's
from
right.
exactly from you not falling into that burnout space. I mean, other people's stuff can burn you out just as much as your own stuff, particularly if you think you're a fixer.
Yeah, even more so because it's not your situation. When somebody brings you something that isn't yours, and you listen to it, let's just take away the trash talk. But if you brought me a genuine concern, and if I take on the responsibility of helping you, I'm going to have to put more effort into that because the problem is not native to me. So I'm going to have to listen more carefully, more intently. I'm going to have to think more thoroughly. I'm going to have to take a lot more pauses because I'm going to have to think about, wait a second, this isn't my life. This is Mary Fran's life. And I have to think about the consequences for your life. Again, a whole situation of things that are not native to me. And people who are, that are great friends, that are counselors, advisors, therapists, they take that on all the time. Such a heavy role. That's why they always say, check on your strong friend, right? Because that strong friend is bearing a lot of burden. Now, just imagine for 2 seconds that you're not taking on Mary Fran's new business idea and helping her think that through, but a bunch of trash talk. Girl, you're
No.
wasting my time. You know what I'm saying? You are just wasting my time. And people don't realize you're wasting your limited capacity for high level decision making. That's what I'm saying. It's a level of discipline. So when you think about like the most practical advice, I'm like, girl, just stop playing in trash. You can make a whole
So,
lot of great decisions if you stop playing in trash.
well, you're totally right, and I think a lot of this idea about burnout has to circle back to the idea that exactly what you just said. We have limited resources.
Mhm.
We as
Yeah,
individuals have limited resources. So this structure, I love this idea of this structure about decisions and how to eliminate certain ones of them. And it's not to say that you don't care. It's not to say that you don't
yeah,
help people, but I have learned this lesson the hard way over time because of getting sucked into situations that were not mine that ended up being very draining. Now I go, okay, I can help you, but this is a SWAT team approach. It's situational. I get in, I do the thing that I can help you with, and then I get the heck
I
out
get
before
out.
all your crazy gets all over me because I don't need any more of that.
Exactly.
Got enough of my own. But this whole concept of making wellness actionable is key because I think over time it has become one of those nebulous kind of, oh, just like the
Mhm.
mindfulness,
Yeah.
oh, wellness. So
Yeah.
this idea that you're bringing strategies to this is really essential.
Yeah, I have a partner that I work with all the time since you brought up mindfulness. Her name's Shantae Hooks. She's a mindfulness and meditation expert. And one of the things, we always talk about when we collaborate is what's the on the pillow solution? So that's the more, mindful practice, but what's the off the pillow solution? Like, what are we going to actually do? What's that thing, that process that needs to change? What's the mindset shift, right? And so trying to give people solutions in both realms because yeah, sometimes people hear concepts or they participate in visualization exercises or meditation and it feels good to them in the moment, but because there's that not that instant gratification with it, then they want to bail on the process. But that's the wrong thing to do, obviously. These things take time. Like you don't get into a certain mindset, a series of habits or behaviors in an instant. Been building these behaviors over time. And so it takes time to neutralize those effects and to correct that behavior. And it's worth the investment if you want to be able to scale something for yourself, be able to scale and grow a career, and ultimately help the companies that you're dedicating your time and energy and resource to. I think everybody should care about this stuff. That's why I keep saying everybody is a risk manager, every leader is a risk manager, because we all have to do these things, and it's fascinating, and it honestly it protects us if you show up this way and you prioritize your wellness, that becomes a catalyst for authenticity. It becomes a catalyst for your voice. It becomes when people see you radiating, they're going to want to know what are you up to. So it becomes a catalyst for collaboration, for sharing, for learning, and just including people. So I really see this as the way forward for business. I see it as a way forward for personal health and for relationships, and that is wellness.
I don't think that we could have sat down and scripted a better way to summarize this entire conversation. So
Yeah.
that I really thank you for that. I thank you for the bringing and of this concept to the corporate world, the recognizing that there are actionable, stress on the word action because we can do something about these things
Absolutely.
and making this part of the corporate culture. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today. This has been a very enlightening and fascinating conversation. I could go on with this all day, but tell people, please, where they can find you and learn more about your work.
Perfect. So, of course, my website, super easy, princesscastleberry.com. My favorite social media platform is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I think I am the only Princess Castleberry there. And my joke is if you find another one, report her because she's a fraud. And I am on Instagram and YouTube as Princess Castleberry Speaks.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Please look this up and please follow Princess Castleberry. Her methods, her concepts, her ideas about bringing wellness into the corporate world are really essential, not only for corporate health, but for personal health as well. So please follow up on this. And if you're looking for more inspiration, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net, where you can sign up for a brilliance bit that will come your way every week. And if you need more inspiration, head over to our Facebook group. So thank you so much for joining us again. And we will see you all next time on Brilliantly Resilient Live.
Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.